We are continuing our read-through of Clive Barker's A to Z's of Horror. Today we're doing L for Lynch Mob. We've read so much. Well, of course, we're on it. L for Lynch Mob. In America, the latest thing in popular music has been called horrorcore. Horrorcore is a strain of rap music that puts the shroud and the sepulcher into urban New York and proves that horror is as old as time itself and as new as a freshly spun look. Such performers as Ozzy Osbourne and Alice Cooper have used horror movie imagery extensively in their music, but now a new breed of rap acts are reworking those concepts. They include groups with such names as Gravediggaz, Flatliners, and Half Pit, Half Dead. The brainchild of legendary New York rap producer Prince Paul, the Gravediggaz, whose 1995 album 6 Feet Deep includes such tracks as 1-800-Suicide, Diary of a Madman, and Graveyard Chamber, consists of the Grim Reaper, the Undertaker, the Gatekeeper, and the Resurrector. Because we'd all been buried as far as the music industry is concerned, we chose the name Gravediggaz, explains the Undertaker, aka Prince Paul. We had to resurrect ourselves. There was a darkness, and within that context, the music fed off that negative vibe, and so anger is the underlying element. The industry was skeptical about all of us as the Grim Reaper, aka Poetic. They felt we'd had our chance and we were over, but we had the creative stamina to overcome any obstacles in the industry put us. We discovered our music trapped the mind of the fourth dimension by going into areas that hadn't been explored in hip hop before, both in subject matter and production. We got to dig deeper than the songs to get the message. In our video, we don't intend to promote any violence or any form of Satanism, says the Resurrector, aka Rosa, aka Prince Rakim. No, sir, nor are we trying to disrespect anybody's religious belief. We're just trying to manifest the horrors of modern day life so we can all recognize them, man, because positive education has to be constant elevation. That means peace. I guess the horror I'm interested in is the horror that is about something else than just scaring people, says Ernest Dickerson, who was the cameraman on Spike Lee's early pictures and directed Tales from the Crypt Presents Demon Night, which included a Gravediggaz track on the soundtrack. To me, the best horror has always been a metaphor for the human condition. The life we live is like a horror movie. Some of the stuff that we go through is like a horror movie. We are just feeding off of everyday situations and showing you the horror of everyday life. According to the Gatekeeper, aka Fruitquan, the Gravediggaz music comes from the thoughts of a man who has been suppressed or of people who have been suppressed. The story of Africans in America is a horror story, continues Dickerson. One of the things that rap does is bring this up. Rap talks about it, rap hits it out there, rap talks about a lot of things that a lot of people would rather just ignore, just deny that they even exist. When I sit out here and look at all these people in the ghettos, says the Grim Reaper, all these mentally dead people, I'm not happy. You know what I'm saying? The theme is like the nastiness, the real dark side of life. So many people are slaves of mental health, explains Resurrector. They don't know what's going on. Our idea is to dig up their mental grave and shed them on a little light about what time it is. Poetic is the Grim Reaper, he brings them in, and Prince Paul, the Undertaker, prepares them. Fruitquan's the Gatekeeper, he sees who's gonna go through the gate and decides whether to let them burn or whether to bring them to me, the Resurrector. I bring them back to life. I'm the antidote to make them see what's going on. There seems to be a problem with Western society in thinking that everything we see here is the world, says Dickerson, that you should only believe in what you see. I don't believe that. And I think that's part of our culture that has manifested itself, having a lot of fallout from our homeland, Africa. I think we take the supernatural for granted in our daily life. There's an aside. 1, 2, they're coming for you. 3, 4, better lock your door. 5, 6, grab the crucifix. 7, 8, better stay awake. 9, 10, it's suicide, friend. From 1-800-Suicide by Gravediggaz. Tales from the Crypt presents Demon Night. USA, 1995, director Ernest Dickerson with Billy Zane, William Sadler, Jada Pinkett, Brenda Backey, CCH Pounder, Dick Miller, Universal Color. Loosely inspired by the HBO TV series, which is in turn based on the EC horror comics of 1950s. Breaker, Sadler, the enigmatic guardian of an ancient key that keeps the forces of darkness from overwhelming mankind, is forced to protect the residents of a remote boarding house from an army of flesh-eating demons unleashed by the collector, Zane, who wants to regain the supernatural talisman that contains the blood of Jesus Christ. Special effects designed by Todd Masters. introduced by the irritating Crypt Keeper, voiced by John Kassir. It's stressful to try to abort all my impure thoughts. I'm losing my mind, and it seems I don't know what's real or a dream. From Diary of the Madman by Gravediggers. There's a picture of gravediggers. No need to cry because we all die, from 1-800-SUICIDE by Gravediggers. A rap horror concept was starting to gel, a roughneck jokey sound that spoke with the voice of street rap, but which underneath the Hammer Films bullshit had something positive to say. New Musical Express, 17 September, 1994. We have another aside here. Tales from the Hood, USA, 1995. Director Rusty Cundiff with Clarence Williams III, Corbin Burnson, Wings Hauser, Rosalind Cash, David Allen Greer, Anthony Griffith. 40 Acres Mules, Filmworks, Savoy Pictures, Color. Urban horror anthology in which 3 Black gang members, Joe Torre, DeAndre Bonds, and Samuel Monroe Jr., are taken on a tour of creepy funeral parlor by a mysterious mortician, Mr. Sims, Williams III. He explains how each person ended up in a respective casket. A trio of racist cops kill community activists. Tom Wright, who returns from the grave for revenge. A battered boy, Brandon Hammond, confronts the monster living in his house. A corrupt supremacist politician, Burnson, encounters the restless spirits of plantation slaves, and a crazy murderer, Lamont Bentley, is put in the care of a ruthless Dr. Cash. In the end, surprise, surprise, Mr. Sims turns out to be the Prince of Darkness himself. With director Cundiff in a cameo role as a teacher, special effects created by Screaming Mad George, and the EFX and the Chiodo brothers, executive produced by Spike Lee. And then the last aside for here is, so you want to die, commit suicide, dial 1-800-cyanide line. As far as life, yo, ain't worth it. Put a rope around your neck and jerk it. Black horror is not a new phenomenon. In the 1930s and 40s, there were such an all-Black horror movies as Drums of Voodoo and Son of Enigma. While during the early 1970s, a new type of exploitation film briefly appeared for a few years in inner-city theaters. Such horror titles as Blackula, Blackenstein, and Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde were at the forefront of this fleeting movement, which was quickly dubbed Blaxploitation. More recently, with the help of executive producer Spike Lee, director Rusty Cundiff, and producer Darren Scott made Tales from the Hood, 1995, a 6 million urban horror anthology. I really like the idea of doing a Black anthology film, says Scott, because there's never been one. And usually when there's a Black horror film, which is rare, it's a spook. And what we're trying to do is truly scare people and tell good stories. The social issues really had to be laid into the story and be intrinsic. We deal with everything from police brutality and child abuse to racist politicians and Black on Black violence. And when you do stories about those things, whenever the message is or whatever the social consciousness is, has to come out of the story. It's subtle enough that it's going to speak to certain people that it's directed at. But for everyone else, it's just another horror story. Maybe when they're discussing it afterwards, the other stuff will come out. According to writer and critic Nelson George, discrimination, racism, the kind of barriers, both physical and almost kind of spiritual, that are in America come through and end up appearing in the artist's work. So much of it's ripe with the imagery of possession and demonology. I mean, the greatest Delta blues musician ever, Robert Johnson, reputedly sold his soul to the devil at a crossroads. Everyone talks about the blues as a great American resource, but there's some pretty evil stuff in it, which may be why it's so American. Gotta go back for a little picture of Demon Knight. Got scenes from the film called Abby, a list of Black horror in the movies. Quote, ultimately, as with all music, you can read anything you like into the Gravediggers' lyrics. Maybe they're scary tales, will find them in court defending themselves from ludicrous claims of backmasking, a Diary of a Madman scenario made real. Musical Express, 17 September 1994. Escape, I have already mutilated your brain like Dr. Arcane. Even if you escape, you'll be going insane. From Diary of a Madman by Gravediggers. What we're doing, says Gravediggers Resurrector, is flashing them different things that happen every day, things that we see or have seen or you have seen. Everyone goes around talking about what they do to people, explains the Undertaker. But a lot of our tracks deal with what people do to themselves. We talk about the social conscious as well as the political aspects of the dark side, agrees the Grim Reaper. People say we're morbid, but if you want to be morbid, turn on the damn news. We have our rhythms, says Ernest Dickerson. These are rhythms that only come from the African American community, only from our music. These are things that nobody else does. It's our own specific way of talking about things, our own specific way of dressing things. I think that, especially in Black music, these issues are dealt with the supernatural or aspects of horror. Nelson George believes that if you can make a link between hip hop or some of the other stuff and horror at all, it's because of the imaginative element of it. So just like the great horror directors Brian De Palma and Alfred Hitchcock and John Carpenter, the grave diggers use imagery of violence to entertain. One of the things we have to acknowledge in America is that violence is entertainment. People are entertained by action, excitement, danger, threat. And these are the things that good rap music provides. These are the things that good horror provides. And it ends with a quote. Bear witness as I exercise my exorcism, the evil that lurks within, the sin, the terrorism. Possessed by evil spirits, voices from the dead, I come forth with grave diggers in a head full of dread. I've been examined ever since I was seen, and they took the sonogram and seen the image of a demon from Diary of a Madman. And that is the entry for L is for Lynch Mob. Last year or the year before, I believe they did release Tales from the Hood 3. I liked Tales from the Hood 2. There was a lot of people that complained a lot about it, but I mean, the political commentary has to be there. And I'm glad that they talk about it in this entry here. This entry is what, 1990. They talk about it as if it's currently 1995 and it's currently 2021. And you can see, and we all know, that a lot of those issues are still huge issues. And I loved the new Candyman. I think they did a beautiful job. Very respectful job. They being, sorry, he did fantastic. Of course, did fantastic. And I like the Jordan too. It is, even though it's not something that we go through. I mean, obviously I'm Mexican, but I mean, I'm not going to live the same life as someone who's darker, and that's really, really difficult. And I can't imagine what they have to put up with, what Black people have to put up with every day. But having some sort of empathy, I think, is very, very important for us as a gender. So that was L is for Lynch Mob. And then next week we have M for Mistress of the Night. So thank you for reading with me. I will see you next week.